going to talk a bit about Shiny apps first. First of all, because we're here, we're hosting the event, and we haven't told you who we are at Datacove. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of that. This is not a sales pitch or anything like that, but this is just me telling you who it is on the stage in front of you. I think I know most of you in the audience. So I'm Jeremy. I'm the founder of Datacove. We are Brighton-based R, Python, and Shiny experts, and we specialize in 3 core areas. So customer analytics. This is to help unearth your most valuable customers. That could be anything from simple database analytics to understanding who your best customer is, to more complex statistical customer modeling, so things like next best action modeling and segmentation to split your customers into smaller groups. We also specialize in marketing analytics. So marketing analytics is to help you save money on your marketing budget. So that could be anything from a simple campaign report to full-blown econometrics, causal impact, media mix modeling to help understand how much you should spend on every single marketing channel. And then we also specialize in process automation. So this is to get rid of the jobs that you hate at work forever. So it's normally things that involve lots of spreadsheets. We write a bit of code and it's gone forever. We also run quite a few of these meetups. So it's not just Brighton. As I said, I've given this talk in lots of other places as well. If you ever find yourself in any of these other wonderful cities, then we have meetup communities in all of them as well. And we would love to see you there. We do a few other things as well. Obviously, Earl. We do training courses, which we'll talk about a little bit at the end. And we also help build your data team, which is our newest service offering as well. So if you're trying to flesh out a full service data team and need to find the right people, we run a lot of these meetups and communities. So we know the people for you. We can help place them into your organization. If you want to find out more, there's some flyers over at the front. Right, salesy bit over, and it's not really a salesy bit, but it's just to tell you a bit more about who we are and why am I standing here talking to you about Shiny app. So I'm going to just introduce a problem to you first of all. So this talk kind of comes in 2 parts. Here's a problem or here's a challenge that somebody's got. And I'll introduce that challenge, but then I'll talk about kind of why we chose Shiny as the solution and how we compiled that app. A few tips on trying to make Shiny apps just look a little bit less boilerplatey. If you worked with a standard Shiny boilerplate before, kind of, oh yeah, that was built in Shiny. I know how that was built. I'm not going to do a live demo. I've got a pre-recorded demo because I'm not brave enough to do a live demo. So I've got a pre-recorded video that I'll show you as well. And then happy to take some questions at the end. So let's just go and talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing. So this was a local, oh, I thought I went 2 slides on there. No, I've got the right slide on the screen. Just looked like it moved very quickly. This was a local government project. So this was working with local government to build a tool, a decision tool to help councils across the UK. And it was to help them make better decisions across it still is. This project is still ongoing, as you'll find out in a second. Make better decisions across 4 key areas. So health and well-being and nature and sustainability. But kind of why these 4 areas? Great places and great cities and great centres are built on great people. Now, what is the one thing that people have that is most important? That is their health and well-being. So if we can understand more about the health and well-being of people that live in our city, then we can make that city a better place for them. Now, how do we make it a better place? People need to get around. If we're living in a city, we will all be moving around that city at some point, and we'll all be moving around and using the infrastructure in that city. And I think we can all agree that in this day and age, we need to make sure that infrastructure is sustainable. So this is not just the transport, this is how the city are performing on things like recycling and energy usage. This is making sure that the entire infrastructure in that city is fully sustainable. And of course, as we're moving around, a city has nature as well. It has birds, bees, butterflies, but then it also has things like waterways and land. And we've got to understand more about the areas that people are using to make these cities better places. So we've got this thing is called Explore, and it's actually part of a 5-year program that we're running alongside local government, local councils as well. Now we're here at this bit in red, so we're actually towards the end of the 5-year program. So we had this idea of let's build something that brings all of the data together. Last year, so 2023 and early 2024, we kind of built an alpha product in Shiny. You're not going to see the alpha product tonight because no one's got their sunglasses. The colors are a bit bright on that. So we've got a beta product with some better colors on it, which you'll see very shortly. And then it's going to form into a soft launch next year. And we will then roll this tool out. But the rollout doesn't mean it's the end. There is a third phase that we'll be rolling into in kind of March, April, to try and constantly improve the tool. And this is bringing together publicly available data. So data sources will always change. We'll always get better data sources as well that we can kind of integrate into the tool. Just a little bit about the partnership, because I think you can't give a talk without loads of lovely logos on the slide. So the lead partner for this is Natural England. So we've been working with Natural England to bring this all together, and that's obviously got government funding behind it. In order to get a tool to work successfully, we need to have a few councils on board to be able to test it and give us feedback and make sure that we're building something that is useful for people. So we've got a few council partners. We're hosting it on local partnerships as well. We've also got academic partners, because this brings a different perspective to the table when we're trying to build a solution. So having the academics was really helpful, because it allows us to look at this from a completely different perspective. We've got a lot of support from the Environment Agency. There's a lot of Environment Agency in there, particularly when it comes to the nature side of things, and others as well. So massive thank you to all of these people, because without these people, this wouldn't have been possible. So why did we do it? What's the challenge here? When it comes to local government, the challenge is really twofold, and these twofold, they're at very different ends of the scale. So at one end of the scale, there is loads of publicly available information out there. There is loads of information on health, well-being, nature, and sustainability. But the problem is that when you start looking and try to unpick all of the data sources that are there, it's a bit of a minefield. And to a non-data person, it's, I've got to make some decisions. You've just given me 100 sources of data. I don't really know what I'm looking at. I don't know how I'm going to improve my decision-making on the health of the people in my area, because I've got so many numbers and it's too much. On the other end of the scale, and where people have tried to solve this problem before, is simplification. Now, we all know simplification can be quite useful and powerful sometimes. But in this context, if you walk up to somebody and say, oh yeah, the well-being of people in your area is 7.4. Great, yeah, that's wonderful. What does that mean? It's like, but it's 7.4. And it's so people have simplified it too much and given one number to try and explain everything. So we need something that sits in the middle. We need to be able to give people powerful access to data and really simple ways of making insights from that data, but not simplify it to a single number. And the solution to that is the Explore platform. So Explore is made up of 3 core components. This is the Shiny app, or this is a prototype of the Shiny app, and that's the bit we're going to focus on tonight. But we've also got factor maps, because factor maps tell us how different data sources are related to each other. Because as I said, the health and the well-being will be linked to the sustainability sources as well. So it's finding out how individual pieces of data on health. So for example, we've got data on anxiety and happiness. Now those 2 things are actually probably quite closely linked to each other. You know, if you're really anxious, maybe you're going to be less happy. So how do these things link? And this is where the factor maps come in. But then we also need to think about what's happening next. So we've got the horizon scanning maps as well. Again, not going to talk in too much detail about them this evening. This tells us kind of what's on the horizon. I mean, horizon scanning, what's going to happen, what we think is going to happen next, so that we can bring all this together. This is kind of what's happening now. This is how things are linked, and this is what will happen next. So I'll talk a bit about the application. There we go. We're moving on. Why did we pick Shiny for this? It's one of those things. There's loads of tools that you can build. There's loads of tools you can use to build things. Why did we pick Shiny? Shiny's really good because the data that we're accessing, a lot of it is open source public data from the Environment Agency and from ONS and others as well. The Environment Agency and ONS have brilliant open APIs that are easily connectable into R. So bringing all the data into R was actually quite simple. Shiny also allows us for a lot of flexibility. There are a lot of requirements for how the app should look, feel, and be used by the end user. And if we start to design this in anything else, it just makes it a little bit harder. So using Shiny was definitely a plus point. Cost effectiveness, I think we all know, if you haven't built or used Shiny apps in R before, Shiny is a really cost effective way of housing applications and data visualization. So if you think about, for example, if you're building a visualization in Power BI licenses are really expensive. A Shiny server can cost anything from nothing up to, I mean, the maximum, and I've never seen anybody use the maximum Shiny server, $350 a month. One cost. Doesn't matter if 10 people are using it, doesn't matter if 100 people are using it, it's one cost. And as I said, I've never seen anybody need that all-inclusive, all-intensive package. So the one below that, which is the one I have seen people use, is $100 a month. And that's it. That's all you're paying. You're not paying licensing fees. And naturally, because this was a government app, Shiny and R have got a really strong community within local government. So trying to build something that could then be easily understood by others within the business using R allowed that to happen. And what we built is something that looked like this. You'll see a video of this shortly. And I'll just talk you through a little bit of it, because the design phase for this app was quite an important phase to make sure that people could understand what they were seeing, but also they could digest it as well. I'm also going to talk a little bit later on about accessibility. So it wasn't just about building an app. We need to make sure this is accessible to everybody that's going to use it. So what about partially sighted people? What about people that, can't see wavy lines or can't understand what charts are showing? So we did a lot of things to make sure this dashboard was fully accessible to anybody that was using it. With the design, so this is, as I say, this is a prototype. You'll see the video shortly, but we've gone for a sidebar layout. So if you haven't worked with Shiny before, you can do sidebar layout and main layout. We've built in our own buttons. We've customized the buttons. We've curved the corners. We built in a top bar. If you want to see how we've done some of that, I will show you that very shortly. But we've also used that. This doesn't look very dynamic because it's not a video, but we've also used dynamic charts as well. Any ggplot fans in the room, you might want to shut your ears in a couple of minutes. I might say some things that aren't very nice, but so we've done all of that. And I suppose we've got an audience of our people. And you probably think, well, how do we do that? How do we make things look like this? Because if you've seen a Shiny app before, Shiny apps that have been built very in a standard way have a very kind of iconic, is that the right word, look? I don't know, but that it's a Shiny app, and we wanted to make sure that this wasn't looking like a Shiny app and it was more something people could interact with. So how do we do it? I'm first going to talk about charts, and you're going to see some movement on here. So as I said, ggplot users, cover your ears, but ggplot's great, and I there is no way I'm going to stand here and say ggplot is useless, not useful. ggplot has got me through many, many years of coding, presentations, and passing data on to other people. The thing with ggplot is if you're building it in an online application, is it's static. So you build a chart and it's just like, that's great, it's static. I don't really know much about the numbers on there. You can't fully customize every aspect of it because ggplots themselves, they don't quite have every single chart type that you might want. So we had to do something different. And this is where we use high charts. So we've used high charts for a few of the things that we've built. High charts is a JavaScript add-on application to R. So it's the high charter, as in high chart ER. It's really weird that it's not high chart R. I don't know why it's got ER at the end, but high charter package. And this means that you can get kind of really clear rendering visuals within an application. So when the user loads the page, this is what they'll see. They'll see it build, and then you can hover over it and see the numbers. So you've got proper tooltips on it. It's much better for accessibility as well, because if you've got a screen reader on your machine, the screen reader will tell you what people are hovering over at the same time. And the chart library is much deeper in high charts. It's not just I've got a line graph here. We built really nice donut charts. You can build heat maps a lot more easily than you can in ggplot2. So using a JavaScript add-on library was really, really useful. But JavaScript alongside CSS themselves were also a really big part of what we built. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the things on the app. So you've got this lovely little red bar at the top. That's lovely, lovely in red. Sounds dangerous when you've got it red, but you can see we've also got a logo here. So you can start customizing things like logos. But within Shiny, what we've done is we have built the entire app just using classes and identifiers. So what do I mean by classes and identifiers? This is where you use things like JavaScript or CSS to give every item a class or an ID, and then you refer to that item as an ID. What do I mean? So I'm just going to put some code up here. So this top bar, we've called it a top bar. You can see that is the class of that item. That's a top bar. And you can then customize the color and say, oh, apparently there's a laser on this. Let's see if that works. No, it doesn't. Obviously, I'm not having great luck with clickers at the moment. No, that's just point. So you can customize the color, you can customize where you've put the text, you can put some padding into it, but then you can also start to put other items on there as well. So you can start to build a class for every item within that dashboard. And then if you want to refer to the class, so here we've got, this is the very first thing on the dashboard, we've got a fluid row. If you've used Shiny before, this is kind of the layout that you use to put pieces of content in. So we've got a fluid row, and we've just referred this item is a class top bar. And so then all of the things that we've put elsewhere in the code to define that class get assigned to that top bar. So it becomes red. You've got a logo in there because you can see we've got a top bar image there as well. You've got your text and you've got all of your fonts that you set up. And then we can do that with other items as well. So I'm not going to show you every single one, but for example, here you've got these, which we kind of call our top insight bars. And you can see we've colored one of them light blue and one of them dark blue, but we've got, it might not be show up as well on here, but we've got some rounded corners. So again, you can classify that, and we've called this a top insight row, and we've kind of rounded the corners off. So I just put a little comment in there, and we've increased the right-hand margin a little bit. So, you know, for certain small pages, if you're on a smaller web page, the right-hand bit might cut off. So we just tried to kind of make sure there's some padding in there as well. And then again, if you're putting in a column in your Shiny app, so this bit here is a column, these two things, you can then refer to that as a top insight row class as well. And this is just a much more elegant way of doing it, because you can set up the structure of every element within your app. You can give it some attributes, and then those attributes, you can then use them across every item within the app. And then the other thing that we did, naturally getting a standard color palette was important, but we wanted to make sure, this is the thing that infuriates me the most about the app. I'm just going to show you, because there's pictures on here. When the app loads, it automatically defaults to the first alphabetical council in the UK, which is Ada. Ada don't have any data for 2019, so the charts blooming break. And of course, when I first built the app, what's happened? What have we done with the data? No, they just don't have any data for that year, but it just looks broken. As an analyst, you don't want broken data. We've set up, again, customized label fonts and axis fonts for all of the charts. So you set them up once, and then every time you build a chart, you can then apply that color palette to your line chart. You can do the same for bar charts as well. Now, logos are quite important. So logos, if you're building a logo into, or an image into your Shiny app, it's actually quite easy to do. So this is my application folder. I've got some data in here. I've got my R data, and somewhere down here, I've got my UI, and I've got my server as well. I've got this folder here, the www folder. If you put your imagery in there, you can just load that into a Shiny app, and that image can be used wherever you position it. So if you go back a slide or two, if I go back to this one, you can see that we've got, say, logos. These are more icons. That's the Wellbeing icon. So we've got the icon in the top left-hand corner up here. So we put logos in there. But then also, R doesn't have that many preloaded fonts. If you built charts in R before, you're limited by the fonts that are pre-built within R. But no problem, because you can put your own fonts in too. So we've customized the fonts. We've picked a specific font face for the app, and you can pick any font face you want. And again, you can just put some code in there to say, great, this is the font there you go. This is the font I want to have in my application. I load that in, and then that font, you can then set a global variable at the top of your Shiny app so that everything's in that same font. And then if you want to change one font across the way, you can then put that font in for a specific individual line item. So set the font at the top of the app, because then it just carries through to the entire Shiny app. I'm going to talk a bit about accessibility as well. So as I said at the start, accessibility was quite a big thing for this app. We needed to make sure, we don't know who's going to use it. So we need to make sure that anybody that uses the app or that opens the screen understands what data they're looking at. And there are probably a few key things with that. So the font, we literally had, it was a call. Actually, it wasn't a face-to-face. We had a call, and we split it into two calls for 3 hours, where I was sitting there live coding, changing font sizes and colors. It was the most enjoyable thing in the world, obviously. So, oh, what if we increase that to 18, 20, 22, 16? It's like, can we have that blue slightly lighter and that one side? So we were just sitting there doing that. But it meant that everybody that was involved and all the key decision makers could actually input into what made this app look good for them. So we've got a font size of 20 here. Now this we felt enabled people that even were partially sighted to be able to understand what that app was trying to convey. On the other side with visual impairments, we've got some alt text on the charts, but also all of the charts. What's really good about high charts and some of the other libraries in R, you can put a tag on the back of the chart. So you don't see the tag. It doesn't come up with, this is a bar chart telling you about anxiety on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. That would be a little bit much to start putting like massive paragraphs of text. But you can add that text onto the back of the chart so that if somebody moves their mouse over the chart and they've got a screen reader installed, they can hear that text read out to them, and it makes it more accessible. Also, HTML attributes, making sure it's a really, really simple thing, but when you're building a Shiny app, because some people might have screen readers on and might be using accessibility, make sure you tell them that it's English. Like, I've actually written this in English. It's one line of code saying language is EN, GB, and then the screen reader knows what it's dealing with. It can probably work it out anyway, but just in case, really, really simple thing to be able to understand that. Also, make sure that when things are loading, if there's any like time delays, you can put, I haven't got it on here, but there's a little bit of code that you can put in for a time delay so that if a screen reader is on, it's expecting there to be a time delay on a load. And this means that the screen reader will give that back to somebody that is trying to access and visualize this application. So accessibility is really important, and we wanted to make sure that this was built in across the board. It's worth saying just before I go to demonstration. So I'm going to demonstrate one of the tools. Now, if you remember back to the beginning, we had health, well-being, nature, and sustainability. So we had 4. There's actually 4 tools. I'm not going to demo all 4 to you today. I'm not going to demo nature and sustainability. Nature is, I mean, it's very niche. You really need to understand your populations, your environments. You need to know what types of land there are. So I think if I demo that, it's just, it might go over the heads of some people here. Same with sustainability. You need to know a lot about energy, climate, fossil fuels. So I'm just going to show you the Wellbeing app because I think we all understand things like health, happiness, anxiety, life satisfaction. Get all the words out properly. So I'm going to show you that. There's also like an overview dashboard as well. So we've got the 4 tabs, if you like, or 4 links, but then we've got one that brings them all together. Here are the top insights on health. Here are the top insights on nature and sustainability. So quick demo. I did record this because I just don't really want to give live demos. So this is the Wellbeing tool, as you can see from Wellbeing. So what we're going to do is we can select our local authority. So local authority is going to use this. So we're going to go in and we're going to select. What do we think we're going to select, everybody? Come on, anyone got any ideas what we might select up here? Yeah, Brighton and Hove. Yeah, it's a good one to choose, isn't it? I'm sure I selected it quicker than that when I recorded. There we go, Brighton and Hove. So we've got Brighton and Hove. Now we can look here. We've got 2 lines. We've got the light blue line, which tells us how we're doing. We're quite anxious in Brighton and Hove. In fact, the whole of Sussex is quite anxious and unhappy, is what I've learned from this tool. The bottom line here, this shows us the national average. This is where kind of everything is nationally. And you can see Brighton, we're a little bit more anxious than most people across the UK. So you've got the 2 lines you can hover over. Here we've got a link to the raw data. So if people want to go download the raw data, you can click that link. And if you want to read more on wellbeing indicators, then you've got a couple of links at the bottom here. And you've got your scores at the top. So that's telling us that the most recent data point for Brighton Hove is 2022. We scored 3.3 and national is 3.2. High numbers are worse. You don't want to be more anxious. And then you can look across happiness as well. So actually happiness, where again, we're lower than average. You can take things off. So this is one of the advantages of using high charts. You can just take series off really easily by deselecting them. And you can look at life satisfaction and worthwhile as well in similar ways. Some fun going on outside tonight. Hopefully they weren't looking at my app and looking at the colors or anything like that. I was just going to bring this. I mean, I'm basically nearly done, but for those of you that really want to go and build your own Shiny apps that look cool, here are a list of packages that we used for this one. Obviously, we did quite a few API connections. Things like HTTR and JSON Lite are really good for connecting APIs up in R. ONS, if you're working with ONS data, some wonderful person I'd love to meet has collected them all into a package. You can call every data set and it just puts it into a data frame for you automatically. It's epic, and there's hundreds of them. I mean, that is a brilliant package. That was very useful. Making obviously we use the tidyverse. We did have some maps in there at one point as well. The maps also have been removed since. And then visualization, high charts and R chart, but also just making sure those visuals are customized so that we've got the right fonts in there. So as I said, you can bring pretty much any font into R. So you've got an extra font package and shiny JavaScript as well. I have spoken for a long time on two things, and you're probably all thinking it's time for me to stop. Well, the good news is it is. So I'm going to say thank you very much, and I'm going to open the floor to questions.
Jeremy, you alluded to someone else designing the interface, and I was just wondering, like, where did the design come from, and was there any user testing? Sorry, UX question.
Where did it? So, I mean, the design. There was a team, an agency of designers on the project who came up with a design. They came up with the little logos, the icons that you saw in the top left-hand corner. I believe, and so the answer is I don't know for certain. I believe a UX person was involved in that and in the testing of that. And I believe that before the apps were put on Shiny server, that a UX person did test them. I cannot say for certain, but I believe that is the case.
Thank you.
Just wondering about the data side of things. Did you, because you said you were making API calls, is that live API calls when somebody clicks a button, or is there sort of a database underneath that?
It's a bit of both. So the things like, because the ONS data sources are quite, the ONS data source is quite small. And also what you've got to remember is it's quite macro data. It's kind of, it's city or county or area level data. So because the data sets themselves are quite small, it's quite easy to form live API calls. For some of them, there still is a database that sits behind it so that we're not making live API calls. And that's where some of this publicly available API, some of the publicly available data doesn't have an API yet, and it exists. So this makes me feel very scared. These data sources exist as spreadsheet downloads on a website. Now, when we built the first iteration of this app, and it was, yeah, you can connect it to the spreadsheets. No one ever touches the spreadsheets, don't worry. Within 3 days of the rollout of the first one, a spreadsheet was removed from the link, and so obviously everything broke. So hence why in this version, there has to be a database that sits behind it, because being told, yeah, the spreadsheets will be fine, and then they went, no. So a bit of both.
High charter, not used that myself. Would you say you could totally replace what you do with ggplot with high charter, or any drawbacks to using it?
I wouldn't say totally replace, because I think ggplot's really good. If you're putting together a rough and ready visualization that just goes into, I've done a bit of analysis and I just want to show you how this thing's moved over time, and it's not something people are going to interact with, I would probably say ggplot suffices. The really good thing, I didn't bring any high chart code up here, which I should have done in hindsight. So I'm giving this talk again in a few weeks. I'm going to do that. If you've used ggplot2, high charts is really, really easy to use because the actual intuition on it is the same. So, you know, for those that haven't used ggplot here, within ggplot, you build your plot up from like a blank piece of paper. So say, I want a bar chart and I want the x-axis to show time and the y-axis. You do exactly the same thing in high charts. So if you've used ggplot2 before, you'll have no trouble using high charts at all.
Thank you.
Any more?
A quick one. With the accessibility, will you be testing that with someone who does require those, or has it been talks about? Because if it's such a big thing, I just feel like it should be looked into.
That is a good question. My honest answer is I don't know, but I'm also going to find out because I'm intrigued myself. So yeah, any answers that I don't know, particularly if they're pertaining to the data or Natural England stuff, I've been told I can find out and get back to people. Should we pass the mic to Fiona and then to Peter afterwards?
Yeah, it was just a quick comment on that, is that if it was using the government design standard, I think there's a requirement that they have to do some testing. So it would be interesting to find out the answer.
No pressure then there.
Hi, yeah. Will this be a public-facing website, and will you be using Shiny in production as well?
Not at present. It sits behind a login wall, so you need to be a local council with a login on the website to be able to access it. I don't know if there are plans for it to be public. I don't believe there are, but that doesn't mean that there aren't.
I always like it in a plot where when you show variability, could be error bars, I suppose. But one of the things that maybe you could do, rather than plotting just an average line, you could do the sort of transparency thing where you plot all of the lines on top of each other, and then you can sort of see you get it in the New York Times and stuff. Do you know what I mean? You sort of get a transparency build up. Do you think that could work with this plotting software? Is it worth a go?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, the thing at the moment, our data sources are very simple. So you got two series. It could. There are some. I'm trying to think. Some on. I can't remember if it's nature or sustainability, where you've got multiple lines. That could become useful if those lines start to migrate closer towards each other over time. But you could do that. You can with high charts. There is a zoom functionality on the plots as well. So the thing to think about with high charts versus ggplot, high charts has been designed, it's a JavaScript library, it's been designed specifically for applications, HTML documents where people want to see trends and see how things move, whereas ggplot has been designed for static. So you can zoom in, zoom out. You can do some quite cool and clever things with a high chart as well.
Yeah, because one of the issues you can hit is if it's actually lots of lines on top of each other, you can hit memory issues, right? Whereas actually you want something that's maybe a vector graphic to do that. I don't know if there's something clever that can do that. I'm just thinking out loud. Yeah, I'll pass it on.
I was just interested to know how the pilots went and kind of what kind of coverage it was getting within those councils, as in who was using it to kind of test it and those kind of things.
Yeah, so I mean, I wasn't involved in any of the user testing, so I know that across the board, quite a few people at Surrey were using it. I'm not 100% sure who. All of these things I can find out. If anybody is interested in the more kind of government side of it, the actual ethos behind the project, I've been told I can pass on details. So I'm not going to stick them up on the screen for GDPR, but if anyone's interested, come and chat to me afterwards.
I'm actually from Norfolk as well, so I was quite interested.
I'll show you what Norfolk looks like in a minute. Any more questions? Any online, Cam? That's a lot of questions. Well, I'm going to say thank you then.